Um, where and when were you born?
I was born in Edinburgh on the 22nd of August in 2003.
So that makes you a Leo Virgo. Do you know
Yeah, Leo.
Leo? And do you identify with being a leader and a person with quiet dignity and who has some regal qualities?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure about that.
Okay. If someone doesn't know you, how what 3 words would you use to describe yourself, your personality, who you are?
Um, Maybe adventurous because I like going outdoors a lot. Um, Creative and determined.
Hmm. What? Where are you in school in your schooling?
I'm in my second last year of schooling. I'm at secondary school.
So that's before the sixth. What do you call that? After secondary school, there's sixth form. Is that what it's called?
A 6 year, yeah. And
And
after that is university.
so you're before the sixth year.
Yeah.
And if you were going had your choice of university and what to study, what would that be? Do you hear me?
I think it cut off again,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. If you had your choice of a university and what to study, what would that be?
Sustainable development at the University of Edinburgh.
Ah, they have a major in that, a field of study in sustainable
Yeah.
development. Ah, fabulous. Would that involve mostly working with the global south and developing countries, or how do you apply that in particular, sustainable development?
I think it's more towards looking at like the UN Sustainable Development Goals and implementing them wherever it's necessary, really. I suppose so. Yeah, that would include the global south as well.
Mm-hmm. And have you had a chance to travel yet abroad?
Yeah, I've been to a few countries. Last year, I went to America and Canada.
And what did you experience culture shock? Did anything seem like, whoa, this is really different from Scotland?
I went to India a couple of years ago, and that was really different from Scotland as well.
Yeah.
It was the culture was really it was really interesting to learn about, and it was quite different as well.
And why, may I ask, did you go to India?
I went. I received a scholarship to go on a trip with this charity that do sort of do residential trips, and while I was there, I helped um, build a school in a small community, learn about the culture, and explore the area.
How wonderful. I had a similar thing where I had a free scholarship trip thing for 6 weeks in India. And I think what I take home is the color. You know, the color of the saris, the color of the powdered dye in the markets. It's so much
Mm-hmm.
more colorful and vibrant than what we're used to in the
Yeah,
West.
I always thought that the best sort of part of it was walking through a market and all the smells of different spices and foods. It was the smell that was really good.
And also, what struck me is there's images of female divinity everywhere. If you're in a taxi, there's Lakshmi's picture, you know, that by the taxi drivers, the steering wheel. Everywhere you go, there's temples and statues and posters of female deities, and that was really, I thought, was wonderful.
Yeah,
um, so, do you have siblings?
yeah. I've got one sister. She's older than me.
And is she a climate activist as well?
Uh, not in the same way. She cares more sort of like, or she does care about climate change, but she likes to focus more on women's rights. Really.
Mm, mm, mm. Um, and what in particular is she working on?
She's just uh, working. She's a student at the moment.
But I mean, in
So
terms of what issue is most important to her in terms of women's rights?
um, I'm trying to think. Um, Probably just about gender pay gap, equal opportunities for men and women, and trying to stop stuff like forced marriage or underage marriage as well, and women having equal rights to make decisions about their own bodies.
It's pretty neat that you're. Is she called a premier? The head of the Scottish government is a woman.
Um, the head of the Scottish government.
Is a woman, and that's kind of a nice role
Yeah,
model.
her name's Nicola Sturgeon. Yeah.
Yeah, Sturgeon. Yeah, and do people think she's doing a good job?
Yeah, I suppose it's everyone feels a bit differently about it. Some people think she's really doing a really good job, and other people disagree. I suppose it kind of depends on your mindset.
Sure. And do you think that she'll lead Scotland out of the UK because of Brexit?
I'm not sure. It's a bit of a difficult question because it's obviously been talked about a lot. She wants to definitely, and there are a lot of people in Scotland that want to see it happen as well. But there are barriers to it. Like the British Prime Minister isn't very keen on the idea, and there are other people in Scotland as well that aren't fond of the idea.
Mm. How did you get interested in climate activism? What made you think I've got to get involved?
Well, I started to get involved in environmental activism when I was quite young. I think age 9 was I remember it, and I started. Um, I organised my first fundraiser when I was when I was 9, and the money went to WWF and shelter. And a couple of years later, I started volunteering for an organisation that works in my area, which surveyed wildlife, educated young people about nature and why we need to protect it. And the reason I sort of became interested in all that to begin with was because I watched lots of David Attenborough documentaries, and I really loved seeing all the animals. But then I learned about how there were threats to them, and I wanted to do my part to help, really. So I've been involved in environmental activism for a couple of years, or for a few years, and late last year I decided I want to get involved in the climate movement.
WWF is the World Wildlife Foundation or Fund?
Yeah, World Wildlife Fund, I think.
Yeah. And what in particular interested you? What, like polar bears or lions, or what really struck you that this is terrible and I have to do something?
I think it was mostly seeing plastic pollution in the oceans and seeing animals and whales choke and die because of plastic pollution, and then also learning about trophy hunting and how animals were killed just for parts of their bodies to be sold as medicine, even though the medicine wasn't actually medicine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Donald Trump's sons like to do that trophy hunting.
yeah,
It's gross.
I don't like it.
No. Um, and then what else did you do for WWF besides fundraise? Anything else that you got your teeth into?
Um, the fundraising is the only thing I really did for WWF, apart from sort of my parents getting me a sponsorship for an animal for a birthday present when I was around the same age. That was really it with WWF.
Mm-hmm. And then where have you found to organize that appeals to you with the climate movement?
Pardon?
What groups do you work with in the climate movement?
So the main group I work with is a group called SYCS, it's Scottish Youth Climate Strike, and they organise they're the group that organise climate strikes in Scotland, and I've been working with them for the past few months to just help organise on social media, to suggest general ideas and organise climate strikes as well.
So it's kind of a branch of Fridays for Future.
Yeah, it is, with lots of like other branches inside it.
Hmm. And how does Fridays for Future work internationally? How much coordination or organizing is done internationally, and how much is mostly your local Scottish group?
Well, the international organization is huge. I think every country has its own different sort of techniques for organizing within their area, within their country, and globally, it's I think it's quite a task to coordinate successfully globally, but they managed to do it through different. I think just through like 10 hours of Skype calls a week, probably. SYCS does contribute to the international planning, but I think every country sort of contributes a little bit. It's not really one country that's dominant in that aspect.
So, are you one of the people that's on those international calls?
No, not really.
Uh, so, is the focus mainly on organizing international strikes, like on Earth Day?
Yeah, there's strike organizing definitely, but there's also looking at other events which people could participate in, like UN summits, the UN climate summit, the COP 25 and 26 as well.
And 26 is going to be in Scotland, right?
Yeah, it's going to be in Glasgow.
So you'll be there for sure.
Hopefully, yeah.
Were you able to go to Madrid?
No, I didn't go.
Um, so in the Scottish group that you work with, roughly what percentage of activists are young women?
I'd say about 60%, 50% to 60%. Half, if not more than half.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Someone that I talked to in the States said that she thinks there's a coolness factor and that it's not cool for boys in secondary school to be an activist. I guess what's cool is to be in a band or be an athlete or something. Do you see that what's cool and not cool influence play out with young men in your milieu?
I know lots of young men who are activists my age as well. They're really keen about it too. I think sometimes there are stereotypes that maybe boys shouldn't care as much about stuff about that. But I think those I'm not sure, but I think that's maybe not as much of a issue over here. I think everyone sort of equally participates over here.
Mm. And what about in terms of the leadership? People who do the work and do the day-to-day organizing, about half and half, or more girls, or what?
So again, yeah, half and half probably. Everyone sort of contributes. There isn't one or two defined leaders. Everyone decides what to do together and then discusses it, and then everyone works together to make decisions.
Do you do that face to face or mostly online, or how do you get together to organize?
It's mostly online because it's quite a lot to all travel to meet together.
Mm-hmm. So do you do like Zoom calls, or what platform do you use to talk?
Zoom calls and Slack.
Hmm. Um, and what's your next big event that you're planning for?
The next big event we're doing is a strike on April 3rd. So that's the next global climate strike in a lot of places. So that's what we're preparing for, is trying to get ready for that. And then after that, we're obviously look to see what the next global climate strike date is. And because we're Scotland based as well, we're going to start preparing for the COP26 too, because we were hoping to have a big involvement in that.
Oh yeah, that's a natural. When you're trying to reach out to people who are uninformed or apathetic, what do you find gets their gets their attention and makes them think, this really is something I should get involved with?
I think when people understand the science and the facts, that's when they become concerned. So when people realise that we're running out of time to deal with this issue, and that if we don't take the necessary action, large, like so many people are going to be displaced, they're going to suffer as well. I think that's the reason why lots of people start to take action, is because they realise the devastating impact it's going to have.
And how do you get that message out to them? Do you pass out flyers, or do you rely on posting on Twitter and Instagram, or how do you put that information into their hands?
We use social media. Definitely, that's one of the main ways to do it, because everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people, a lot of young people, all have access to social media. So it's a really good platform to use. We also, there are lots of different groups within SYCS, and they all sort of do their own individual things for reaching out to people, like having stalls at events, talking to schools, publishing articles in local newspapers. We've got a website as well that we can put stuff on. So it's mostly online platforms, but there's other work as well.
What about in the school that you go to? What kind of outreach do you do there?
We've got a school eco group at the school I'm in. So our eco group meets once a week, sometimes twice a week, and we've got our own sort of board downstairs where we can put up posters and leaflets and information for other people in the school to see. During school assemblies, we can talk to the year groups about our group, what we're doing and why we're doing it as well.
What do you hear from people who say, "Oh, I don't want to get involved with that. Not for me." What's their thinking? Because it seems so obvious, but a lot of people aren't involved.
I think their thinking is that it won't really affect them, so why should they worry about it? But climate change will, yes, it will affect people mostly in the global south a lot worse, and but it will still affect people in Scotland as well. So recently there was flooding in the UK, and lots of people lost their homes, and and there was really bad weather in Scotland as well. So and that was linked to climate change. I think, yeah, people don't realise that it will impact them as well, even if it's as not much as others, it will still impact them.
Hmm. Um, Visually, what do you find gets people's attention or conveys the message in terms of art on flyers or social media? Have you realized, oh, this is a very effective and this is not?
I think images that show the reality of the situation. So during the recent Australian bushfires, there are lots of images of kangaroos that had been burned or kangaroos that have died. And I think visually that was what caught people's attention, is seeing innocent animals that have suffered because of something the people have done.
The koala bears hugging people and them feeding them with
Yeah,
bottles and their little paws burned. The koala bears were, that was a strong image.
yeah, I think because it was a really upsetting image, that's what conveys the seriousness of the issue to people.
Mm. Um, what I find in organizing that is problematic is burnout, people who talk too much just to be heard, and people who say they're going to do something and don't. So I wonder if you find those are issues, or what you think are issues in making organizing effective.
Yeah, I think some people are probably more effective at organising than others, but it's a skill that can be learned, is how to, or organising skills can be learned. So for the people that maybe need a bit more help with learning how to coordinate and plan and facilitate, uh, we try to help those people by running training sessions.
Ah,
We and when I'm just talking about when we do coordination, um, and we try to not really sort of rely too much on one person. Like everyone's welcome to take breaks to relax for a minute, because it can get a bit overwhelming. So everyone's okay to step back, and if they can't do something, then it's okay for them to ask someone else to help them with it.
what do you call the trainings? What are the titles? We're going to do a workshop on what?
I think like workshop on facilitation, workshop on um, coordination workshop on just general skill development.
So take facilitation. What would be an example of something that you would say, keep this in mind when you're facilitating a group?
Keep in mind probably just to get around to everyone to listen to what everyone has to say. And yeah, if someone wants to make a point, just let them say it and then discuss that as well. Let everyone's voice be heard.
Yeah, but what happens if you have talkers? I mean, do you ever set time limits?
Not really time limits, but you can sort of ask people to stop talking for a minute to let someone else talk if someone else has a point to make.
Mm-hmm. Who sets the agenda for a meeting? So we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4 today. Who sets that?
So usually we create a Google document and the agenda is open for everyone to add to. So everyone can say, right, we should probably discuss this, and they can add it on, and so everyone can add what they want to the agenda, and we discuss everything.
Is it a problem that meetings get too long or not?
Sometimes they feel a bit long, but I think it's usually just because everyone's tired during meetings. They feel longer.
And what do you do to keep from being burnt out after doing this work since you were 9?
Taking a break sometimes, I guess, is going out for a walk and forgetting all the stuff for a bit and taking time to focus on other stuff instead.
What do you do for fun?
I like to go for long walks. I do boxing as well. And also schoolwork and studying, but that's not really as much fun. That's just more of a necessity.
Is boxing boys and girls, or do you just box with girls?
It's boys and girls.
And is that kind of fun to punch somebody, some big guy in the wherever?
Yeah, I guess. But then you just have to be aware they might hit you back.
That's interesting. When you go to university, tell me again what you're thinking about studying.
Sustainable development.
Right. And then what will you do with it after you graduate?
I'd like to get a job working for some campaign groups or pressure groups like Greenpeace, Amnesty International, Friends of the Earth, and then, or even hopefully be able to get a job working for the UN or some NGOs. That would be good.
So that means you'll be a traveling person probably, which is interesting. How do you deal, if you experience it, with critics like people who harass you on the street if you're striking, or online, trolls? Do you get that kind of opposition or not? And if so, how do you cope with it?
Yeah, online people have sent me messages before and they've left comments, but most of them are fake profiles anyway. So they're either just bots or fake profiles. So I tend to just block and ignore them because they're not actually real people. So they don't deserve attention or any time to be wasted on them. And in the street, this has happened before, when someone has been opposed to us striking and what we're striking about, we just remind them about what the science says. I'd remind them what the science says and that this is fact. And you can't argue with clear fact. And we're doing this because of how scary the facts actually are.
The UN climate report last year said at that point in 2019 we had maybe 12 years to turn it around, and if not, it's really irrevocable damage. Is that your understanding? Maybe we have a decade?
Yeah, I think it's until 2030 to drastically reduce emissions by. Otherwise, we set off an irreversible tipping point. by which there's no point of return. By that point, we can't deal with climate change anymore. So we have 10 years basically to avoid setting off this chain reaction after that. After if we set off
You froze.
that,
You that it froze for a bit. Okay, now we're back.
oh, or,
The it seems what's really unbelievable is that some governments deny or pretend that climate change doesn't exist, like in the U.S. And I think Boris Johnson is not an advocate for activism for climate change.
no, he's definitely not.
What does he say about, oh, these floods are just because they're cycles, or he just doesn't talk about it?
Well, he doesn't deny climate change. He admits climate change exists and it's a serious issue, but he doesn't really understand how serious an issue it is. So he thinks it's acceptable to set net zero emission targets by 2050,
Oh, right.
even though we only have till 2030. And sort of, he doesn't believe in these climate protests that are happening either. He doesn't really support those or like those. And although he kind of, I guess in a way, says he does care and that he wants to do something, it's not, the targets aren't really realistic, and what he wants to do is not good enough, I guess.
I wonder if he'll change now that he's expecting a baby. I wonder if that'll make him think, oh, this is personal to me. I'm bringing in a human into this disaster waiting to happen. We'll see.
I'm not sure. I'd hope that he would want to change his mind for his own baby's future, but I'm not sure if he would.
Yeah, we'll see. Why do you think it is that Gen Z, your generation, like you, started at 9? I don't know of other generations that were fundraising for wildlife when they were 9. What is there about this era that young people are starting so young to be such a strong voice?
I think it's because probably me and lots of other young people were the first sort of generation of young people to learn about all these threats to wildlife at a very young age. And of course, climate change has been talked about for the past 20 to 30 years, and it's been talked about more recently. But when I was younger, it was still being talked about a little bit, and I found out about it when I was younger. And I suppose that's it really, because we're the first generation of young people to sort of really realise what we're doing to the planet.
And also social media enables people to organize in a way that they couldn't without money.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder if parenting practices have changed, that parents are more likely to respect and involve their children in decision making rather than be authoritarian. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure about that. My parents have always encouraged me to stand up for what I believe in and be active and help others. And they've never tried to really say that I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that. Like, they never said I couldn't go on a climate strike. They supported me in doing that.
Nice.
So I'm not really sure. I just know that from my own experience, my parents support me in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Do you think of yourself as a feminist?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
Because, well, a report actually came out by the UN just this week saying 90% of people are biased against women. That was a report I read earlier this week, and it's from the UN. But also, I think it was because sorry, there's something in my eye. Because we don't have gender equality, because women still don't have the choice to make decisions about their own bodies in some countries. In some countries, women still aren't even allowed to vote. They've just got the right to be able to drive by themselves. Women, young
So,
girls are, yeah, young girls can be married off to older people. They can be forced to marry off to older men as well. Girls as young as 13 can be married off, and I think there's not really an excuse for that. I know it's a cultural practice and it's tradition, and that some communities see it as acceptable for a girl as young as 13 to be married off to a man who's 10 years older than her.
or 20 or 30.
Or 20 or 30, yeah. But it's still not acceptable, and it's not good for her. It's not really good for, I suppose, anyone in the long run, because then she's not going to school, and when girls aren't educated, poverty is more of a problem, and countries can it's a bit more for countries to develop. It's more difficult for countries to develop when girls aren't in school. So we need girls in school, and we need to then let them have the same opportunities by not expecting them to have babies at age 14 and carry water all the time.
Right.
Okay.
It's amazing how much time girls and women spend carrying water.
Yeah, it's millions of hours every year
And
carrying water when they should be in school.
Yeah, you should be in school if you can afford the school fees. Because even countries that say we have free education, no, you got to pay for books and uniforms and whatever else, and poor families can't.
Yeah.
What other organizations do you look to internationally that are youth-led climate activism besides Fridays for Future?
Other youth organisations. This isn't really like an activism organisation in a sense, but Scouts is a youth-led global organisation that have tried to do lots of work. Recently, have tried to do lots of work helping communities and doing stuff for the environment. And I've been part of Scouts for 10 years now as well. Another youth organisation I know of is what's it called? The We Movement, and I did a little bit of work for them a couple of years ago.
As in WE?
WE, yeah.
And what? Well, let's go back to the Scouts. So in the U.S., we call it Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, and they just recently were combined so that you wasn't just boys or Girl Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
Is it that the same kind of organization where you get merit badges and go camping and stuff?
Yeah, it's the exact same, but girls have been allowed in scouting for 30 years now, and we still have guides, which are a girl-only organisation.
Girl Guides, yeah.
Yeah, Girl Guides, but scouting, which is what I'm a member of, has allowed girls in for decades now.
Mixed. So
yeah.
You would go on a camping trip with boys and girls?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And then what is their focus, and where did they start?
The Scouts?
No, the We movement?
Oh, right. They focus more on bringing communities out of poverty by trying to improve access to clean water, education, to a stable income, and also to good healthcare, access to healthcare. So by trying to sort of help people have access to all these things, they aim to lift them out of poverty, and young people have been very much involved with that.
Is it a UK group, or it's international?
It's a Canadian organisation. It started in Canada, but it's grown to America and the UK as well, and other countries too.
And are you involved in that as well?
I was. That was the group I went on a trip to India with. That organisation. And I did a little bit of work for them a year after, just talking about the trip to other people and attending a couple of events they did. But I haven't really done any work for them recently. I'm still aware of it and follow them on social media.
Any other organizations that you look to? What about Extinction Rebellion? Because that's international now.
Yeah, it is. I helped set up an Extinction Rebellion group in Scotland, and I did want to go to the last rebellion in London, but school stuff kind of got in the way, and then my parents weren't as keen after the protest was called illegal. They were completely fine with it before, but they don't want me to get arrested. They're fine for me to go to protest as long as I don't get arrested, really.
And
And they were worried about that.
Yeah. What do you think about the XR tactics of, demonstrations and making almost like art, street art, as protest? What do you think about their tactics?
Their tactics do differ. So the way all groups in the X are different. Some use tactics which I wouldn't agree with, like gluing themselves to trains which people need to get to work to, even though trains are a solution we should be looking to now for transport because it releases less CO2. So I don't agree with that because these workers are trying to get to work using a more sustainable method.
Hello.
It's not them that should be blocked. I do like their art ideas though, making the big street art, their paint the walls or paint the streets campaigns. I think that's really nice. I think the way they have a sort of a red band, I think it is, and they do some really good art displays as well. The general rebellion is people. The main tactic is civil disobedience of people chaining themselves to stuff in the middle of roads. And yes, I do think, in a way, I do agree with that because it is necessary to get this issue noticed. And when they're chaining themselves to buildings outside the UK Parliament, that's directly getting politicians' attention. And I think it's a good way of getting attention. Even though sometimes they've done it in the wrong place, maybe, like chaining themselves to buildings in the wrong location. But when they do it in the right location, I think it's a good tactic. But I suppose it does depend on the location. The tactics of XR are controversial in a way. Some people will obviously be very against them. Some people will be really agree with them. Some people will be kind of in the middle. And I guess I'm kind of in the middle of I agree with some of what they do and disagree with some of what they do as well.
Roughly what percent is, in your observation, of XR activists are young?
Well, there's a whole Extinction Rebellion youth branch, which has grown quite a lot, and I know they have tens of thousands of members, and though they certainly do on social media following anyway. I think maybe not as much as half are young people. I think maybe a quarter or a third are young people.
What about groups like Greenpeace that have been around for a while?
Greenpeace is the kind of organisation that I want to work for Greenpeace. I suppose that'd be like my dream job is working for Greenpeace to do anything really. Their tactics tend to be more like going out and stopping boats directly, oil and going out to oil rigs and climbing up them and doing banner drops, and sort of having a more direct interference to the people who are actually a big part of the issue, to the oil companies. So I think that is a good tactic, but because it's not really affecting sort of people who aren't responsible for the issue, it's taking the message directly to oil companies.
So if you were giving advice to someone who was younger and wanted to get involved, what would you suggest to them as what's the most effective way to really make a difference? What can you do?
Well, for starters, I encourage people to get social media, to be really active on social media, and to start to raise awareness. And then also work in their own community, engage with other people in their own community. Attending climate strikes is, of course, really good. That helps as well. But it really just engaging with other young people around them, teaching them about the issue, talking to their parents, talking to other adults, and seeing what can they do to help, whether it be just emailing their local politician or organising a huge march. I think whatever they can do, they could try, and they should.
Roughly, how much time do you spend a week organizing online and on the streets or whatever?
Um, I have my eco group meetings, which can be 15 to half an hour a week. That's for the eco group. When some weeks we have meeting calls, and they can sometimes last up to an hour. And I do a litter pick every single Saturday, and that's usually 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But the actual organising, I think I'd spend maybe usually between an hour and 2 hours on each week, depending on if we have calls or not. If there's no calls, I might not spend any time organising. But if there's lots of calls, it could be up to 2 or 3 hours even.
What else do you do in your own personal consumption or non-consumption to help the environment?
So I'm vegetarian, and I'm trying to eat less dairy as well. Um, I've decided not to fly this year or the year after. Um, I I also have stopped buying new clothes, so I shop secondhand, unless I absolutely need to. But most of the clothes that I buy now are from charity shops or from eBay. Um, and I do usually actually try to avoid buying stuff offline that have come really long distances. Um, if I go into a supermarket and I buy fruit as well, I look at the labels on the fruit, and if it's come from somewhere like Spain, I'd buy it. But if it's come from somewhere even further away, I won't buy it because it's likely they would have been flown in. So I try to watch where I buy my fish from as well.
Mm. Um, is there anything else that you think people should know about climate change, climate effective organizing that we haven't talked about?
Just that it's really just that people should get involved with it and really give it all they've got.
How optimistic are you that change will happen? That this we can turn it around?
Sometimes it varies. If I'm having a really bad day, I might feel really down about it, quite sad and a bit pessimistic. But most of the time, I'm really optimistic because this issue has gone from being something no one really talked about to something everyone's talking about. Millions of people are getting involved, and millions of people want to see it dealt with. And for the first time in a very long time, politicians are really starting to sit up and talk about it. So I am quite optimistic because I think we're really making a difference.
Mm. Oh, that's encouraging. Um, Something that's been bothering me is studies show that anxiety and depression are really increasing for adolescents, especially for girls. And I wonder if you see that with your peers, and if so, why are they more anxious, and why are girls especially more anxious than boys?
Um, I think mental health is becoming more of a serious issue as more young people are starting to. It's sort of the issues being talked about a lot more. Mental health, there isn't as much stigma around it anymore, so more young people obviously talking about the issue as well, and it is becoming. I think one of the main reasons is becoming more of an important issue and more people are suffering from mental health issues is because of there's more to be worried about for young people. I guess there's lots of young people get anxious about the climate and other issues. They get anxious about their future and might what happen. As for girls being more anxious than boys, I'm I'm not sure about that because I know boys do get anxious and depressed too, so I wouldn't be able to really give a singular reason why girls are more anxious.
Some
But the climate does tie into it because climate anxiety is in eco anxiety is definitely becoming a problem as well.
Some scholars say that girls spend more time on social media and boys spend more time gaming, and that on social media it makes girls feel like, oh, this Instagram picture that was photoshopped, they look great, I don't look that great. Oh, I see there's this party, I wasn't invited. So there's like comparison and feeling left out or inadequate because of social media. Do you think that's a factor or not?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of young girls are influenced by social media, especially when it comes to body image, because they see all these celebrities who have hourglass figures and like they do look quite good, but it's Photoshop, and these celebrities have photoshopped themselves to look like that, and that's what can make young girls feel insecure and a bit anxious as well because they are sort of being told that that's what they should look like in a way. So I think social media it has a negative impact on body image definitely, especially among young girls. Um, but young boys as well can see male celebrities of big muscles and stuff, and they might not have that as well, and they might think, oh, they should have that. I suppose it affects boys and girls as well. Um, I was
I think that like
trying to
like the
think.
Kardashians wear strange confining undergarments that make their waist smaller and their I know so it seems like it's a painful process that they go through to have those strange hourglass
Yeah,
figures.
and people get plastic surgery as well, and of course Photoshop. Photoshop is something members of the Kardashians have used to change how they appear in photos to make their waist slimmer or their hips wider or to make them just look skinnier in general, and that does have a negative impact on people's own perceptions about their body.
Mm-hmm. Um, it, I'm going to ask you to suggest other people that should be in the book, and I'm going to say thank you.